Now I'm going to please to leave the chair to Matteo Onori. Let me change it. Maybe later. Yes. Matteo. Thank you, Eduardo. Matteo is the GIS and database expert of the project partner 2, Amici della Terra, that is the official manager and of the reserve here in Calabria, Foce del Fiume, Crati and Lago Tarzia. And the floor is yours. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Matteo Onori. I am the GIS and database expert for Amici della Terra. My presentation is called MED for EBM Application Experience in the Corigliano Golf, Italy. Today I will show you the main steps of the EBM experience. For convenience sake, I decided to group all the official steps in 3 main steps. The first one, as you can see from the slide, concerns the workshop and the stakeholders' involvement. This was the first moment for the identification of the socioeconomic and environmental components of our project area. We will see later the phase number 2, which is the EBM technical work, in which, in this phase, we'll analyze the data collection, the diagram formatting, the gap analysis, and eventually we will watch to a video concerning the ISP feeding. Following the phase number 2, there will be the phase number 3, which is the system cause effect analysis, but we decided to take a late during the session of tomorrow morning. I want you to put the attention of the arrow that goes from the top left of the screen to the top right. This is because I think that the workshops and stakeholder involvement has a role in the success of the other phases as well. Okay, we will start talking about the first phase. Actually, the first phase of the EBM protocol consists of 3 main parts, which Eduardo explained before for sure better than me. The first one is the definition of the key stakeholders as well as their role in the project. The second one is the spatial and thematic scopes of the EBM application, and the third one is the ecosystem context analysis. So as I say, the first phase is the key stakeholders involvement. As you can see from the image, we of course made a lot of workshops, but they were held online due to coronavirus pandemic. The second steps consist in the spatial and thematic scopes of EBM application, which was important for the definition of the major characteristics of the area. It was important both in terms of spatial definition. This means that we had to choose which municipalities would be part of our area. And you can see the image. All the municipalities that we chose correspond to a distinct territorial unit here in Calabria, which is the Sibari plain. Moreover, the work that we have done with the stakeholders helped us in the identification of criticalities and resources of the area. On the left side of the screen, you can see a part of this is the national map of land use. You can see that the Sibari plain, which is the largest plain here in Calabria, of course, has a consistent agricultural activity. On the right side, you can see that our area has the Domenico Pappatera, which is the president of Pollino Park, said this morning, is home of many Natura 2000 sites, among which, of course, we have to mention the Pollino National Park, which is the largest park in Italy, and also the reservoirs of Tarzia Lake and Crati River, which we visited yesterday. The aim of the third part, which is the ecosystem context analysis, was to define the environmental and socioeconomic components that the stakeholders consider distinctive in our area. The following step was to spatially organize the components in a framework, and in this framework, all the components are represented by an arrow or a box.
Of course, as Eduardo said before, the framework takes the name of system diagram. We decided, alongside the stakeholders, to divide the diagram in two main parts. The first one is the socioeconomic matrix. Is represented by the yellow box here in the slide, and it contains all the anthropic components such as industry, infrastructures, agriculture, fishing, breeding, ports, and so on. The second one in the green box is the environmental matrix, which contains all the environmental components such as air, water, soil, flora, fauna, and habitats. Of course, I want you to notice, and I want you to pay attention to the fact that this was a participatory process. So it was not something that we decided, but it was something that was decided alongside the stakeholders. This is the graphical representation of the system diagram. We will see this is the old version of the system diagram. You can recognize on the left the big environmental matrix, while on the right there is the socioeconomic matrix. These are the components, the boxes are the components to which in the technical part of the project we have attached all the data collected. Now we will see in more detail the main steps of EBM technical work, of course, on which I worked with more effort because I am the GIS and database expert for Amici della Terra with Marrico Benelli, which is there, but didn't listen. And we will not focus on what results we obtain, but rather on how we obtain these results. This is a flowchart describing the logical and chronological sequence of the phase number 2. We have started from the main product of the workshops, which is the system diagram, and we decided to reorganize the spatial organization of the components. Then we started working on data gathering, which was the hardest task, as well as the other partners, for two reasons. The first one is that we wanted to know which data were necessary to populate the ISP software. The second reason is that we had to find this data, which was the hardest task at all. The next steps were addressed almost at the same times. We have the gap analysis, which helped us in the definition of the data gathering new strategies and the definition of indicators as well. And eventually, at the end of the presentation, we will watch a video that concerns the ESP feeding and the system cause effect analysis. Okay, now we will start speaking really briefly about the diagram formatting. So the diagram that I showed you before, that was drawn up with the help of the stakeholders, was modified to achieve three main objectives. The first one is readability. You will see that we improved the graphical display and the spatial organization of the components. The second objective is functionality. Actually, we adopt the official nomenclature for the components of the diagram. And we took the official nomenclature, of course, from Italian and European institutions that are responsible for publishing the data. The last one is stratification. We wanted to create multi-level components to display data at different levels of detail. You can see the example of agriculture represented by a pyramid on the right. We have taken from ISTAT, which is the Italian National Institute of Statistics, both the data concerning agriculture, of course, and the second thing that we have taken from ISTAT, of course, is nomenclature. So this is a practical example on ISP software of what stratification means. You can see that the agricultural land, which is the top of the pyramid, can be represented by, for example, as a sum of utilized agricultural area and other land. And in the graph on the left, which is taken from ESP elaboration, we can see the total of agricultural land, while we choose the sticked bar to display utilized agricultural area and other land. Going deeper, you can see only the utilized agricultural area as a sum of grasslands, arable croplands, permanent croplands, and family gardens. And going even deeper, you can see arable croplands with its composition. In this case, cereals, legumes, potatoes, industrial plants, and further crops. This is how the agricultural component of the diagram evolved after our work. Of course, the components that have been identified by the stakeholders have not been deleted, but absorbed in the new components. And of course, the same work has been done with the other components of the diagram. This is how the diagram looked before, and this is how the diagram looks now. As you can see, the overall frame of the diagram has not been changed. You can still recognize the environmental matrix on the left and the socioeconomic matrix on the right. Now we will speak about the data gathering and management. So this is the hardest part, because the data collection procedure is the heart of ISP feeding, of course. During the gathering of the data, we tried to answer two questions. The first one is what? Because we needed data that could be linked to the corresponding socioeconomic and environmental component in the diagram. And so we started gathering data, both from data banks and the stakeholders. Among them, we have ISTAT, ARPAGAL, Domenico Pappadera, which spoke this morning, is the director of ARPAGAL. ARSAC, ISPRA, university, municipalities, and European agencies such as Eurostat, environmental European agency. The following step, as I told you, was to attach the data to the corresponding environmental or socioeconomic component. The second question we wanted to answer was how. Of course, when, because this is the point, when we could assess the data. We often had extremely detailed data banks. For this reason, we try to focus on three elements. The first one is sustainability. We have to remember that the software and in general the workflow has to be fed also in the next years, because in the next years we hope that new updated data will be released. So we decided to leave out data that is extremely detailed or not useful for our investigation. The second one is functionality. Firstly, we focused on data that could ensure an immediate and understandable representation of the phenomena. Third one is uniformity. We wanted the data, of course, to be formatted in a certain way, and to do so we used Excel tables and SQL Server. Now we will speak about the gap analysis. There are three main factors that form our gap analysis. The first one is that we don't have access to data. Less often, the data seem not to be produced. This means that the data is produced, but not yet published. Within the environmental matrix, we haven't found data for chemical stouts of groundwater and surface water, as well as terrestrial habitats. Within the socioeconomic matrix, we haven't found data for infrastructure, fishing, ports, and wastewater. The solution we propose is to involve the stakeholder even more to get the data, of course. This has happened, we will see this tomorrow, for fauna and flora, which we got from University of Calabria. The second factor that forms our gap analysis is that we have access to data with not adequate spatial resolution. Again, data are gathered with a municipality resolution or by point, but then is published with an aggregate form. This is the case, at least for Italian diagram, for fertilizers, soils improvers, tourist arrival and presence. Here we have proceeded upscaling our data with SQL and Excel estimates. At the same time, doing these estimates, we wanted to have at least one official value with municipality resolution to evaluate our estimation. This is an example of our estimation over tourist presence. We had a verified value from an official report of 2015 with a municipality resolution, and we have estimated a value of 432,000 presences in to 2015, which is just 2,000 less than the official value. So actually, we could use this data. Third factor is that we have access to data with a not adequate time resolution. Again, the data are published with a lower resolution than it's produced. And I want to say again that having data with a better resolution lead to a better system cause-effect analysis. For example, this example, we have data for air quality, the station that we saw yesterday, in aggregate form. So we have annual means for air quality. But of course, I would like to know with higher detailed data if there is some peak during, for example, the summer period, to know if the tourists have, for example, a pressure, a more impact on the air quality in that area. Now we will see the definition of indicators in which Marrico worked a lot. Tomorrow we will take a look with more time. But concerning the identification of indicators, we have adopted a model which is widely used in scientific literature. It is the DPS-IR model. As you can see from the image, it is a circular system where each class has an effect on the following class. So starting from the drivers, which are agriculture, industry, tourism, we know that they cause a pressure, for example, pollution, to the state of the environment, for example, to the water and soil qualities. These elements lead to impact. So, for example, an impact on biodiversity, to which there should be a response at the institutional level. So we started from this model to create a more complex net of indicators. This is the result of our reworking of the DPS-IR model, because it was a linear model, but in this case it's like a 3D set of indicators. And we have adapted not just the socioeconomic and environmental metrics of IR diagram to the DPS-IR model, but all the stages of our work. And so we have the pressure indicators and the driver indicators that are related to the socioeconomic metrics of the diagram. We have the impact indicators that describe the change in the state, and so in the environmental components of the diagram, due to the anthropogenic pressures. And at the end, we have the response indicators that describe a human action taken to resolve the problems. I'm going to show you a short video about the data and the ISP software. We will see the data that we gather from the Environmental European Agency is data concerning bathing water. It's aggregate form, so actually it's not so useful for our work. Then we will compare them with the same data but with higher detail. We took it from ARPACAL, and at the end we will compare the high quality data with number of beds in the hotel in the area. So, we have selected the body water data quality component in the diagram. Here, the data is aggregated by the European Environmental Agency. The quality is divided into 4 classes that go from 1, which is poor, to 4, which is excellent. From the graph, you can see that almost all official points of survey in our project area have a good or excellent quality. The same thing that Domenico Pappatera said this morning. So I can think that the quality is quite good, but we have to remember that this data aggregated by here. Same thing. Okay. You can see that most of the points are with a blue color, which means that they have excellent quality. Okay, I have selected higher detail quality data, the same data but with a higher detail from ARPACAL, which we collected from official reports. From the graph, you can see that in the top there are annual means for Enterococcus, and in the middle for E. coli, that are under the limits, not so much, but under the limits, while the peaks for the summer periods are higher than the limits. This happened for two municipalities, which are Cassano and Ionio, which we are, and Corigliano Rossano. In the lower graph, I can see that the limits have been exceeded 13 times and 6 times during the summer period. Okay. The strength of this software is that it lets you cross the data in a short amount of time. In literally 10 minutes, I crossed the values of Enterococcus and E. coli with the number of beds in hotel, which you can see this time at the bottom of the graph. And you can see that there is a strong correlation that has to be verified, of course, between the exceedances, the peaks in the summer period, with the number of beds. Of course, still, the top of the graph is the same as before, but there is a correspondence with the number of beds in the municipalities. So lastly, we want to recall which were the two important results of our work until now. First of all, we managed to involve all the stakeholders in our project. Both of the phases, the first one, the middle one, and the third one, which I remember is not the official division of steps in our project. Second, we have started a systematic and sustainable gathering procedure of our data. And all these two efforts lead us to what we are currently doing, which is the system cause-effect analysis, which we will take a look tomorrow with the help of Marico Benelli. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Very interesting presentation. And without wanting, we confirm what the president of ARPACAL, Dr. Papaterra, tells this morning. So,